Now we're going to get kicked off with, of course, the state opening of Parliament, the King's Speech. It was deeply engaging for anybody that watched it. So let's just run through the key points here. So they're going to focus, the new Labour government apparently is going to focus on illegal migration. I'll explain why illegal is in bold in a minute. Online safety, of course, we talked about that on Monday. Energy. Railways, they're going to renationalise the railways, but they're not going to buy back the shares. They're going to wait for the contracts to expire and then basically take control back. So that's going to be another public-private partnership, undoubtedly. Devolution, planning, we'll come on to these in a second. Mental health and homeschooling are, I suppose, the key ones. But if we look at the migration situation first, here is a graph from 1991 up to date. The red line there being the number of people that have come into the country. So that's basically a rolling annual quantity, and then the green line being the number of people that have left the country, and the grey line being the net migration. And if we look at the peak there, which is 1.2 million people, so this is in June 2023. So this is the figure of people that came into the country between June 2022 and June 2023, 1.2 million people. And of those, 52,530 were considered to be illegal migrants. So my question is, if migration is an issue for most people, then why is Nigel Farage, why is everybody focusing on illegal or so-called irregular migration? It's the regular migration, which is really having the major impact on population in the UK. But Labour Party continuing with the same narrative. We mentioned online safety on Monday. Labour will build on the Online Safety Act, they said in their manifesto. And before the election, they had said that they absolutely supported the idea of legal but harmful. Now, if you remember, this was the concept that speech on the internet, which was legal but was viewed as being harmful, should be censored. Well, they are intending to bring this back. Charles is going to be covering a little bit on energy in a minute, but of course we also mentioned on Monday the setting up of the so-called mission control for clean power 2030. Charles will be covering how they're going to implement this later on in the programme. But just to comment on this briefly, the King's Speech says Astra Trader to see legislation to create GB Energy. Now, a couple of interesting points about that. GB Energy will be based in Scotland. But he goes on to say, a confused attempt to set up a nationalised energy company. Oddly, it will neither generate power nor sell it, but instead designed to pass on to taxpayers projects private sector decided are not viable. This may be true, but I think it's not the whole story. I think, again, we're looking at public-private partnerships in anger here. And so we keep an eye on this to see how that develops. Mental health was mentioned, and particularly of interest, and we've got to keep our eyes out for this. They're talking about amending the ways that people can be sectioned, or the terms under which people can be sectioned. It's not clear to me yet, and I haven't seen very many comments about it in various media sources, what exactly that means. So that's another one we've got to keep an eye on. And then, of course, we've got the question of education, and you're going to have to remind me the name of the Education Secretary.
Phillipson, Bridget Phillipson.
Bridget Phillipson. It's on screen, for goodness sake. Okay. Right. Anyway, she was giving a speech before the election. Again, it's on the LabourList if anybody is in the slightest bit interested in going to see the pantomime. But the key point about here, the usual rhetoric about raising educational standards and so on. But it does look, Charles, like they are going to implement a national register of homeschoolers. I don't know if you've got any thoughts on that.
Well, it seems so. I mean, it's yet another instance where the net has been cast wide, in effect, to capture people who are not being educated in a correct manner. Therefore, the parents have, in effect, abrogated responsibility. But of course, what they really mean to do is to capture everybody within this net, including all the homeschoolers who are giving perfectly sufficient or more than a better education than the state might be putting on. So it's really a sort of smokescreen, I think, to bring under control those that are seeking to operate outside the government's tentacles.
And another issue mentioned was devolution. So let's listen to Angela Rayner from a day or two ago speaking about this.
Well, first of all, this is an opportunity for those councils that haven't had a devolution package to really get on board, and I hope that they'll take up that offer and we can devolve things like skills, housing, planning and employment support to really kickstart what's happening in their local area. As the Prime Minister set out, those with skin in the game are at the forefront of really making the change, and for us to get that growth across the whole of the country, we know that we have to work in partnership with local authorities, with mayors, and to really kickstart our economy everywhere. You'll have noticed that I changed the department name to put local government right at the heart of it again. You know, these are local authorities provide some of the most critical services to people every single day, and I recognise that. I recognise the challenge that they've faced over the last 14 years, and that's why I want to put them on stable footing for the future and really bring them around the table to tackle some of the inequalities and the things that are holding them back.
So the question is this nationalisation of local authorities? Because we know that many local authorities in major financial difficulties at the moment and effectively bankrupt. But of course, this whole devolution agenda has been going on for quite a long time. It's part of Agenda 21. And again, if you haven't picked up a copy of Your Life in Their Hands, please do so from the UK Column Shop, because we explain the devolution process and how that's changed over the last 20 or 30 years and why it's being done. It is part of Agenda 21 and therefore Agenda 2030. And they're probably not going to stop there. They're also talking about setting up councils of the type that Ben Rubin has been speaking about with a view to replacing the House of Lords. They're certainly talking about getting rid of the remaining hereditary peers. So any independent or non-party political members of the House of Lords will go, and so on. And there's a big discussion to be had on the House of Lords and so on, but that's for another time. And the other thing that was mentioned that I just wanted to throw into the mix here is they were very, very clear that while Britain will stay within NATO and will support NATO till its dying breath, there is renewed momentum into building a European defence capability and a new treaty being talked about, which is effectively going right back to the whole European Defence Union agenda that we were speaking about in 2016, 2017, 2018, up until Brexit. So that policy has not disappeared.